They blocked my driveway like it didn't belong to anyone, like it was just some extra piece of pavement they could borrow for the weekend. And the worst part wasn't the truck itself. It was the note on the windshield, neat, laminated, official-looking, like they genuinely believed they had the right. That's the moment I realized this wasn't a mistake, it was a decision, and once I understood that, I knew I wasn't going to let it slide. So let me back up a bit, because none of this makes sense without context. I live just outside a gated neighborhood called Ridgeway Hollow. It's one of those places with brick walls, a fancy iron gate, and a homeowners association that takes itself way too seriously. My property sits right next to their northern entrance, about 2 acres of land my dad bought long before Ridgeway ever existed. Back when this was just open country and gravel roads, not manicured lawns and newsletter committees arguing about mailbox colors. My dad used to joke about that neighborhood. He'd sit out on the porch, look at their gate, and say, "That thing's not keeping people out, it's keeping people in, and I'm just fine being on this side." I didn't fully get what he meant back then, but over the years, I started to see it. See, I'm not part of their HOA. Never have been. Legally, they can't tell me what to do with my property, and I can't vote on anything they do. We exist side by side, but separate. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to work. Most of the time, we just ignore each other. Occasionally, someone from the neighborhood will slow down when they pass my place, like they're inspecting it, checking if I'm up to standard, or whatever that means. But nothing major. No direct conflict. Until that Saturday morning. I'd gone out early to grab groceries. Nothing special. Just a usual run into town. Coffee, eggs, a couple steaks I'd been looking forward to grilling later. It was quiet, peaceful. One of those slow mornings where everything feels easy. And then I turned onto my road and saw it. A black pickup truck, big, polished, spotless, parked sideways across my driveway like a barricade. Not half in, not slightly over the line, completely blocking it. Like someone had deliberately positioned it to make sure no one was getting in or out. At first, I just sat there in my car, staring at it. Because your brain does this thing, right? It tries to rationalize. Maybe it's temporary. Maybe someone's just turning around. Maybe it'll move in a second. But it didn't. I pulled up closer, rolled down my window, and that's when I saw the sign. Laminated. Taped neatly to the inside of the windshield. Ridgeway Hollow Art Festival, event parking. Temporary use. Temporary use. I remember actually saying that out loud. Temporary use. Like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Because here's the thing, my driveway isn't part of their neighborhood. It's not shared space. It's not even adjacent in a way that could be mistaken. It's mine. Always has been. And yet here was this truck, parked like it had every right to be there. I checked around, half expecting someone to be nearby, maybe unloading something, maybe setting up for whatever this festival was. But the road was empty. Quiet. Just me, my groceries, and this truck blocking my way home. So I did what most people would do. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the sign. It rang a couple times before someone picked up. A woman's voice, upbeat, almost cheerful in a way that felt rehearsed. Ridgeway Hollow HOA. This is Melissa speaking. I explained the situation. Calm at first, maybe a little confused, but polite. I told her there was a truck parked across my driveway, that I wasn't part of the HOA, and I needed access to my property. There was a pause, not long, just enough to feel intentional. "Oh," she said, still cheerful. "Yes, that's part of our event overflow parking. We're hosting our annual art festival this weekend." I blinked, looking at the truck again like it might suddenly disappear. "Right, but that's my driveway," I said. "I need it cleared." Another pause, then a small, almost amused exhale. "Well," she said, "the vehicle is authorized for temporary use. It should be moved once the event concludes." I felt something shift in my chest right then, that subtle change when confusion turns into irritation. "When is that?" I asked. "End of the weekend," she replied, like it was obvious. I let that sit for a second, then said, a little more firmly, "No, that's not going to work. I need access today." And that's when the tone changed. Just slightly, but enough. "Well," she said, "you can park on the street like everyone else attending the event." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm not attending your event," I said. "I live here." There was a pause again, longer this time. Then she laughed. Not a big laugh, just a quick, dismissive one. Well, she said, I'm sure you'll manage. And then, she hung up. I sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand, listening to that empty line. You ever have one of those moments where it's not just what someone said, but how they said it? That little laugh, that assumption that you don't matter, that you'll just deal with it. Yeah, that stuck. I looked at the truck again, then at my driveway, then back at the sign. Temporary use. That phrase kept bouncing around in my head, like they decided my property was just an extension of their event space. Like I was just adjacent. And that's when I felt it, not anger exactly, not yet, but something quieter, sharper. The kind of feeling that makes you stop reacting and start thinking. Because here's the thing about me. I don't like conflict. Never have. I'm not the guy who yells, or makes scenes, or escalates things just to prove a point. But I also don't like being dismissed, especially not on my own land. So I sat there for a minute, engine still running, groceries in the back seat, and I thought about my options. I could call a tow truck, but technically, it might turn into a whole legal mess. I could call the police, but I had a feeling they'd treat it like a civil issue and move on. And honestly, none of that would address what really bothered me. Because this wasn't just about a blocked driveway. This was about someone deciding they could use what's mine and then laughing when I pushed back. And that's when I remembered something sitting quietly in my garage, left over from a different chapter of my life. Something simple, legal, ordinary even, but in the right combination and with a little patience. It could turn temporary use into a very different kind of problem. So I killed the engine, sat there for another few seconds, and let that idea settle in. Because the thing about moments like that is, you don't want to act out of pure anger, you want to act with intention. Anger burns fast, but intention, that lingers, that teaches a lesson. I backed my car out onto the shoulder, grabbed my groceries, and carried them inside like nothing unusual was happening, which, in a way, made it even stranger. Because inside my house, everything was normal, quiet, familiar, the kind of calm that makes you question whether you're overreacting. But every time I glanced out the window and saw that black truck sitting there like it owned the place, that calm slipped a little. After I put everything away, I stood there in the kitchen for a moment, staring at the sink, and I could hear my dad's voice in the back of my head again, clear as ever. People will take what you let them take. He wasn't a confrontational guy either, but he had a way of drawing lines without raising his voice. And right then I realized I hadn't drawn mine yet. So I stepped out into the garage. It still smelled faintly like fertilizer and old tools, that mix of earth and metal that never really goes away. Along the back wall were a few plastic bins and stacked bags from when I used to run a small landscaping side business. Nothing fancy, just weekend jobs, leveling yards, fixing drainage, reseeding lawns. Honest work. I crouched down and opened one of the bins, and there it was. Powdered gypsum, bentonite clay, a half-used bag of lawn seed. To most people, that stuff doesn't mean much. But if you've worked with soil long enough, you know exactly what it can do. Gypsum helps break up compacted ground, bentonite, though, that's a different animal. Add water to it, and it swells, thickens, turns into this dense, sticky mud that clings to everything. And when it dries, it hardens. Not quite concrete, but close enough to make your life miserable if you're stuck in it. I sat back on my heels for a second, just looking at it, and I'll be honest, I almost talked myself out of it. Because it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to follow through. There's always that voice that says, just let it go. It's not worth the trouble. But then I thought about that phone call again, that laugh. I'm sure you'll manage. And something in me clicked. Yeah, I muttered under my breath. I will. I grabbed the bags, dragged them closer to the garage door, and then reached up to uncoil my old garden hose. The rubber creaked a little as it unwound, stiff from sitting too long, like it hadn't expected to be used for anything important again. Out front, the truck was still there, quiet, untouched, like it had no idea what was coming. I started simple. First, I stretched the hose across the entrance of the driveway, letting it snake along the gravel and asphalt, positioning it so I could reach every part around the truck's tires. Then I grabbed the gypsum and began sprinkling it across the ground, slow, steady, like I was prepping a lawn for reseeding. If anyone had driven by, it probably would have looked completely normal, just a guy doing some yard work. And that was the beauty of it. There was nothing aggressive about what I was doing, no confrontation, no yelling, just quiet preparation. Next came the bentonite. That part one was more generous with making sure it coated the areas around each tire, especially where the rubber met the ground. I didn't rush it. Took my time. Every movement deliberate. And then the seed, a light layer over the top, just enough to make it all look like a legitimate soil treatment. Because technically it was. By the time I finished spreading everything, the ground looked dry, harmless, like nothing more than a patchy driveway getting a little maintenance. That's when I turned on the water. The first spray was light, just a mist, enough to darken the surface. Then I eased into it, letting the stream soak deeper, watching as the powders began to react. The bentonite started to swell almost immediately, turning the dust into a thick slurry, slow-moving, sticky, creeping its way into the gravel and under the edges of the tires. I walked in a slow circle around the truck, spraying evenly, making sure every side got its share. The mixture began to ooze, clinging to the treads, filling the tiny gaps in the ground, building itself into something far more substantial than it looked at first glance. And all the while, I kept my breathing steady, my movements calm. No rush, no panic, just patience. After about 20 minutes, the area around the truck had transformed. What used to be firm gravel and asphalt was now a soft, dense layer of mud, thick enough that if you stepped in it, you'd feel it pull at your shoes. I shut off the hose, stepped back, and looked at my work. It wasn't dramatic. Not yet, but it was enough. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water, sat down by the window, and waited. It didn't take long. About an hour later, I saw a movement down the road, a figure walking quickly, posture stiff, purposeful. As she got closer, I recognized her from a distance, not because I'd met her before, but because she carried herself exactly the way I'd imagined. Melissa, the HOA president. She was dressed like she was heading to brunch, wedge heels, light summer dress, phone in hand, completely unprepared for what she was about to step into. She stopped a few feet from the truck, stared at the ground, and then looked up toward my house. "What did you do?" she called out, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on an old rag, like I'd just finished some routine chore. "Afternoon," I said, calm as ever. She pointed down at the mud, her expression twisting between confusion and anger. "What is this?" she demanded. "What have you done to our vehicle?" I glanced at the truck, then back at her, and gave a small shrug. "Just working on my driveway," I said, "improving the soil structure." Her eyes narrowed, not because she didn't understand, but because she did. "You can't do this," she snapped. "That vehicle is part of an official neighborhood event." I tilted my head slightly, like I was considering that. "On my property," I said. There was a beat of silence, and then she stepped forward, just a little, enough for her heel to sink into the mud. She froze, looked down, tried to pull her foot back, and felt the resistance. That was the moment it really hit her. Her voice rose, sharper now. "This is completely unacceptable. I'm calling the police." I nodded, leaning lightly on the hose. "You should," I said. "Might be a good idea." She stared at me for a second longer, like she was waiting for me to back down, to apologize, to fix it. I didn't. So she turned, carefully stepping back onto the pavement, already dialing her phone. I watched her walk away, heels clicking faster now, tension in every step, and I felt something settle inside me. Not satisfaction exactly. Not yet, but a quiet certainty that whatever happened next, it wasn't going to go the way she expected. Because this time, I wasn't the one being told to manage. She didn't have to wait long for the police out here. Things move a little slower, but not that slow, and I had a feeling she made it sound urgent. About 40 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy rolled up, dust kicking behind his cruiser as he eased to a stop near the driveway. I stayed where I was, leaning against the fence post, watching the whole thing unfold like it was someone else's problem. Melissa was already halfway down the road before the car fully stopped, waving her arms just enough to make sure she had his attention first. You could tell she was used to being heard, used to things bending her way. She pointed toward the truck, then toward me, talking fast, probably laying it all out in a way that made me sound like the unreasonable one. The deputy listened, nodding occasionally, not saying much. Then he glanced over at me. "Sir," he called out, casual but firm. "Mind coming over here a second?" I pushed off the post and walked over, hands relaxed, no rush. Up close, he looked exactly like you'd expect, late 40s maybe, sun-worn face, The kind of guy who'd seen enough small-town disputes to know when something wasn't worth the paperwork. He gestured toward the driveway. "This your property?" "Yes, sir," I said. He looked at the truck, then at the mud, then back at me. "And you put this down?" I nodded. "Working on the driveway. Soil conditioning." There was the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth, like he understood more than he was going to say out loud. Melissa stepped in, her voice tight. "He's deliberately sabotaging our event vehicle. This is malicious." The deputy glanced at her, then back at me. "Any damage to the vehicle?" I shook my head. "Haven't touched it." He looked down again, nudged the edge of the mud with his boot, then straightened up. "Well," he said, dusting his hands together lightly. "It's his property." Melissa blinked. "That's it. You're not going to do anything." He gave a small shrug. "Nothing illegal about improving your own driveway, ma'am." There was a pause, heavy, quiet, the kind that lands harder than an argument. And just like that, the balance shifted. The deputy tipped his hat slightly, turned, and headed back to his cruiser without another word. Engine started, dust rose again, and then he was gone. Melissa stood there for a second, staring at the empty road like it might rewind itself. Then she looked at me, really looked this time, and whatever she saw, it wasn't someone she could brush off anymore. "This isn't over," she said, low and controlled. I gave a small nod. Didn't think it was. She turned and walked away, a lot more careful with her steps now. And just like that, the waiting began. That first night was quiet. The festival must have been in full swing inside their little gated world. Music drifting faintly through the trees, laughter carried on the breeze, but out by my place, it was still. Just me, the truck, and the slow, steady work of physics doing its thing. Every couple of hours, I went out with the hose and gave the ground a light misting. Not enough to flood it, just enough to keep that mixture alive, soft on the surface, dense underneath. It was a delicate balance, too dry and it might crack, too wet and it might wash away. But right in that middle, that's where it held. By the next morning, the truck looked different. Not damaged, not exactly, but humbled. The once spotless black paint now had flecks of dried mud splattered along the lower panels, the tires half sunken into the ground like they'd grown there overnight. It wasn't stuck in a dramatic way, it was worse than that. Subtle, stubborn. Around mid-morning, the owner showed up. I saw him before he got close, mid-30s maybe, sunglasses, clean cut, the kind of guy who probably took pride in that truck. He walked up, slowed as he took in the scene, then stopped completely. "What the hell?" he muttered. He circled it once, then climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and gave it a little gas. The tires spun, not violently, just enough to send a soft spray of mud outward, tapping against the body like rain. He tried again, a little harder this time. Same result. That's when the frustration kicked in. He stepped out, slammed the door, and looked around like someone might explain it to him. His eyes landed on me, standing off to the side, watching. "You did this," he called out. I took a few steps closer, hands in my pockets. "Improve the driveway." He let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "Man, I just parked where they told me to park." "I figured," I said. "Still my driveway." He looked back at the truck, then down at his shoes as he tested the ground, felt it give just a little. "Can you fix it?" he asked, not quite meeting my eyes. I paused for a second, not to be dramatic, just to make sure he understood the weight of the moment. "It'll dry eventually," I said. "Or you can get it towed." He exhaled slowly, ran a hand through his hair, and nodded, not happy, but not arguing either. Because deep down he knew. By that afternoon, word had spread. You could see it in the way cars slowed as they passed. People inside Ridgeway Hollow whispering, speculating. I don't use Facebook much, but a buddy of mine texted me a screenshot from their neighborhood group. "Whose truck is stuck at the north entrance? Can someone contact the owner? This is affecting event traffic." I didn't respond, didn't post, didn't engage. I just kept watering. Day 2, same routine. The mud held. The truck didn't move. The festival wrapped up that evening, and you could feel the shift, the energy fading, the convenience gone. What was temporary use was now just a problem nobody wanted to deal with. By day 3, they called in a tow truck. Big rig, heavy chains, the whole deal. I stood off to the side as the operator assessed the situation, boots sinking slightly as he walked around. "This ain't gonna be quick," he said. And it wasn't. It took him the better part of an hour just to free the tires, digging, adjusting, pulling inch by inch. The engine groaned, the chains tightened, and finally, with a deep, reluctant lurch, the truck came free. But it didn't leave clean. Deep ruts carved into the driveway, thick tracks of churned mud stretching out toward the road, a mess that was going to take real work to fix. I didn't say anything, just watched. Later that afternoon, Melissa came back. No heels this time. Flats, practical, and a folder clutched tight against her side. She stopped a few feet away, looked at the damage, then at me. "We'd like to resolve this," she said, her voice measured, controlled, but missing that earlier edge. I nodded once. "I'm listening." She opened the folder, pulled out a document. "We're prepared to offer $1,200 for driveway repairs," she said, "and a written agreement ensuring no vehicles associated with Ridgeway Hollow will enter your property again." I took the paper, glanced over it, then looked back up at her. "Add something," I said. Her jaw tightened slightly. "What?" "$500 a day," I said, "for any future violation." There was again that pause. Not confusion this time. Calculation. She knew what this was, not revenge, not exactly accountability. And after a moment, she nodded. "Fine." She signed. I signed. And just like that, it was done. That evening, I raked out the driveway, spread fresh gravel, smoothed over the ruts as best I could. It took a few hours, but by sunset, it looked like itself again, maybe not perfect, but solid. And as I stood there, looking at it, hose coiled back up, tools put away, I felt that quiet settle back in. Not victory, not really. Just balance. Because here's the thing. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't damage their vehicle. I didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't step outside my property lines. I just made it very clear where those lines were. And maybe that's what stuck with me the most. Not the truck, not the mud, but how quickly people assume they can take a little space if you don't push back. So now I'm curious. What would you have done? Would you have just parked on the street and let it go? Or would you have drawn the line like I did? Let me know in the comments, because out here, between what's legal and what's right, there's a whole lot of gray.